I'm Brandon. Welcome to my channel, Books in the Shire. About a year ago, I did a video on all the series that I will not be continuing with. And so since then, I have several more series that I'm not going to be finishing. So I thought I would make another video kind of talking about what books I'm not going to be finishing, what series I've decided to, I guess, DNF, and why. If you liked any of these books or any of these series, please don't take offense. I just didn't enjoy it. It just wasn't my cup of tea, and that's fine. Everybody has their own opinions, thoughts, feelings towards stuff. So these are just my feelings. Like, I just didn't enjoy them or didn't love it, so that's why I'm not continuing. But no hate if you did enjoy them. I'm glad you found something you enjoyed. It just personally wasn't for me. The first series is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I've read Alice in Wonderland, the first book, but I haven't read Through the Looking Glass. The reason I'm not going to be continuing with this series is just I didn't like Alice in Wonderland. I thought that it was like fine. I read it years ago. I've read it I think twice, and I read it several years ago the second time I read it, so I really don't remember much. I just remember I didn't love it. I felt like it was not as whimsical or as interesting as I thought it would be. This one's just like a lame one. I don't really have much to say about it. It's just I'm not gonna read the second book, so that's why it's on this list. The next series is Bridgertons by Julia Quinn. Yes, I was in my Bridgerton era, and yes, I still probably will watch it when it gets released, because I'm that bitch. But I read the first book because, so this was like shortly after the second season came out. I was really wanting more Bridgerton content, but I didn't want to just rewatch the show. So I was like, you know what, screw it, I'll give the book a chance. I never thought I was going to read them, but I was like, might as well. So I read the first one, The Duke and I think I gave it 3 stars. Like, realistically, it's not terrible, but I didn't like it. I thought that the show did such a good job of really expanding the world and, you know, filling out the plots more, because I felt like a lot of the plots in the book were just really not fully fleshed out, I guess, and they were just very minimal. The show did a really good job of expanding the world and expanding what you saw. Granted, I know the books are from each sibling's perspective. I'm pretty sure at least the first book's from Daphne's perspective. It's her love story, basically. But like, I still feel like you weren't given anything about any other characters besides Simon and Daphne, and that's something I didn't really care about. The next series I know is super loved by a lot of people, and I just really didn't care for the first book, and that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I read the first book a few months ago, and honestly, I didn't like it. I liked Laszlo. I thought he was an interesting character. I liked the premise of the story about like the gods, or the children of the gods and everything, but I felt like it was trying too hard to be unique and different, and in doing so it actually was very cliche and like expected. I liked a lot of the build-up. I liked the elements about the story, but I didn't actually like the execution of the plot. I really didn't like a lot of the characters, and yeah, I just really didn't like it. I'm so sorry if you love this. It just wasn't for me, and that's totally okay. I'm not gonna shit talk it because you loved it. It wasn't for me. The next series is the Brooklyn Brujas series by Zoraida Cordova. I read 2 out of the 3 books, and I did enjoy this series. I think I gave the first book 4 stars and the second book 3 stars. I don't totally remember, but I think that this series is definitely written for teens. Like, I think a lot of YA can be, you know, it can kind of appeal to a lot of different age ranges, but I feel like this series specifically is written for teens, and like for teens to be able to see themselves in the story, their struggles and all of that. And while I could recognize some of my teen struggles in these books, for me currently it just didn't translate well. Like, not translate well, I wasn't there mentally anymore. You know, I'm not a teen anymore, so I didn't connect with it fully, but I think it would be a great series for teenagers. It just wasn't for me. So I really enjoyed the first book, especially. I thought the premise was interesting, and I love that this is about, you know, Latinx culture and their types of witches, if that makes sense, like their stories on witches. It's not, you know, Western culture, which I really liked, because even though some of the terminology like bruja and stuff I was familiar with, a lot of the intricacies about witchcraft and how it all plays out within that culture I was not aware of. So that was really interesting to be able to see those, or to read about that and to kind of get these different perspectives. The characters and the plot were also really interesting, but like I said, I think it just definitely is geared more toward teens, so it just, I wasn't fully connecting to it. I don't think it's bad by any means. I think it's actually really great. But for me, I just, at my age, I'm not even that old, but at my age, it was not, I just didn't connect to it as much, but it's still really great, and I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in like wish stories. Next is Fable by Adrienne Young. I've read the first book in this series. I don't fully understand this series because I thought it was just a duology, but I guess there's like a whole ton of other books in it, so I'm not gonna read any of those other books, but I've only read Fable, and I'm gonna be honest, I really, really did not like it. I couldn't distinguish characters from each other, and I think I might have briefly talked about this in another video, but I genuinely don't remember. But all of it is written from, I believe, Fable's perspective. I think the whole book's from her perspective. You know, she joins this crew, it's a pirate book, she joins this pirate crew and everything, but I felt like a lot of the characters, I couldn't distinguish them without the author prompting, like, so-and-so said this, and I'm like, okay, cool. But there was like 3 or 4 characters that I couldn't really distinguish from one another because I felt like the author didn't elaborate them or make them unique. They just felt very similar to me. I also didn't love the plot. I thought that it was an interesting premise, but I felt like it just wasn't executed that well for my liking. I really don't have anything good to say about this book, and I just really didn't like it. It wasn't for me. Next is Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. I've read the first book in this series. I haven't read anything else. This is a adult romance series, and technically they're all companion novels. They're not actually, like, you're not following the same set of characters. I don't think you are, at least. But like I said, I've only read the first book, and I was really excited for this series because myself, I am a fat woman, you know, so I was really excited to read a story about fat women finding love. And that was what initially drew me, and I thought the concept was like somewhat interesting, but it kind of felt tropey to me, but I really didn't care because I wanted to read about a fat main character. But I just felt like the character was really immature. I'm pretty sure she's supposed to be maybe mid-20s to early 30s. I don't know her exact age, but I'm 24, almost 25, and so I felt like I was more mature than she was. And I understood a lot of her struggles because the reasons I thought she was immature is because of a lot of her animosity between her and her parents, particularly her mom. I can totally relate to that because I had a lot of that with my mom growing up, both my parents, but particularly my mom. So I completely understood that. But I felt like instead of either cutting ties with her family because they were so damaging or actually working to make that relationship, she was so content in basically being bullied and mistreated by her parents. And I thought that that was going to be kind of a redemption arc in the story, as like her standing her ground and all of that, but I don't remember it ever happening, and if it did, I don't think it was well done because I clearly don't remember it happening. I thought even though it was going to be triggering for me, it was going to be like, wow, look where I've come, look where this character's come throughout the book, but it was never like that. It was just always the character, oh poor me, oh woe me, which understandable, she was mistreated, but at some point you either got to cut ties or, you know, stand up for yourself, and she didn't do any of that, so that really bothered me. Next is Fractured Fables by Alex E. Harrow. This is a short story fairy tale retelling, I'm pretty sure. I've only read the first book, and I thought it was a full-length novel, first of all, so that I want to preface that because I thought it was a full-length novel, and then I got it as a gift. When I got it, I was like, oh, that's a short story. And I think before that I had maybe written or read 1 or 2 short stories, so I wasn't totally familiar with that formatting, I guess. So it was very new to me. And my biggest complaint about it was that it felt too short. Like, I wanted so much more. I liked a lot of the plot lines. I liked where things were going, but it wasn't fleshed out as a full-length novel would be. So I always felt like it was being cut short. Like, these really good moments were being cut short because it needed to move on because it was such a short story. So that was something for me that was really challenging. I don't think it's terrible. I would actually recommend it to people, especially if you like fairy tale retellings. I thought it was interesting, but yeah, that format just wasn't great for me. I'm not super accustomed to short story formats, and I just because I'm such a plot reader, I don't think that format is for me. One minor issue I had with it too is that the main character, she's like from modern day and she gets transported basically to this fairy tale realm. So that was a bit odd for me, I guess, was like the whole use of technology and all of that. That just kind of felt out of place to me. But it didn't completely take away my enjoyment from the book. Half the time I forgot it was happening until it was happening. So, you know, that was just a minor thing, but ultimately it was just the formatting in short story format just wasn't for me. Next is The Witch Haven by Sasha Payton Smith. I believe this is just a duology. I don't know. I read the first book, and when I read the first book or started to read it, I thought it was a standalone. I'm pretty sure it was marketed that way, but then they decided to write a second book, so it became a series. I didn't know that while I was reading it, but I DNF'd this book because, I don't know, I just didn't feel connected to the characters or the story. I thought it had such a phenomenal, like, first few chapters because you, like, jump in right with the main character finding out that she's a witch, basically, like, learning she has this ability. I was really intrigued by that. I really loved that first chapter or so. But then she's taken to this, like, witch academy or something, I don't fully remember, and that's kind of where it started being less interesting for me. I felt like nothing was happening, but so much was happening at the same time, and I couldn't connect with the characters. I felt like there were too many characters for me to be acquainted with so quickly. They just kind of all came about. And there's a mystery element to it, and I was enjoying the mystery, but genuinely I couldn't remember why the mystery was happening or why it was pertaining to the plot. The plot. It just kind of felt a bit disjointed to me. I would maybe retry reading this book, maybe in like a year or a few years down the line, just to see, because I was intrigued, and I was also listening to it via audiobook, so that might have been why my brain might have been wandering while I was trying to listen, so I was losing pieces. But for the time being, I don't think I'm ever going to finish this series or keep going just because I felt kind of disconnected to the story. Next is The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page. I've only read the first book in this series, and it's just a duology, I believe. I gave the first book 4 stars. I actually did enjoy it, but I think upon reflection, I maybe rated it too high. Not that it was like bad, but I think it's maybe more worthy of a 3 stars. I think I just really liked the college setting and the witch vibes to it, because it's all about witches. That was very intriguing. But again, I listened to it on audiobook, and this was before I like found my audiobook process. So I was just listening to books, and I would zone out a lot. So I think I zoned out on this one. So I really don't remember a lot that had happened, but I think I rated it a bit too highly because I was like so wrapped up in the, oh, I really enjoyed the setting and the witch plot. But the characters weren't my favorite. Not that they were bad or anything, they just like didn't stand out to me. And then again, a lot of the plot lines weren't my favorite. They didn't stand out to me. So I realistically think it's more of a 3 star. And I was originally planning to keep going with this series, but I thought that like after I had finished reading it like a month or so later, I genuinely forgot about this book. I forgot I had read it. When I moved, I was like, oh yeah, I still have this book. Like I totally forgot about the book completely. So that was kind of my indicator on like, I really don't think I'm going to read the second book because I forgot about the first one completely. So that's why I'm not going to keep going with it. The last series that I'm not going to be continuing with is Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. I just read this book in January, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. I think it was like a fine, fun novel. Like I had a good time when I was reading it. But at the end, I was like, okay, I'm content. I really don't need anything else. Like the characters were fine. The plot was fine. I'm fine. Like it was fine. I felt very much like this was geared a bit towards a younger audience. Like if I was in high school, I would have loved this shit. I would have been like, oh my God, Ridden, he's so hot. I love him. Like I would have been that girly in high school. I know I would have been, but I read it now. And so at 24, it's not my fave. It was fine. I would definitely recommend it to people if you want a pirate book. I thought it was a fun pirate book. If you just want a fantasy book, it was also a fun fantasy book. Those are all the series I'm not going to be finishing. I'm sure in a year or so I'll have another video like this with other books that I'm not going to finish, just because, you know, you can't like everything you read, especially if it's a series, you might not love it. Not especially, but even if it's a series, you might not love it. So yeah, those are books I'm not going to be continuing with the series. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in another one.